opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Howdy, hello, everybody. Come to you cordless. It's Thursday night, April 2nd, 2026. I am Jim Peters. Welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. This is episode number 333. How the hell did we get through so many? Don't even ask me. Our guest tonight is Louisa Peck, who is, I guess, I was just thinking about this in the parlay of our culture now, we call a near-death experiencer. And also a recovering alcoholic, and we're going to put her on the screen now from Needham, Oregon. Did I get that right?
Manzanita, Oregon.
Manzanita.
It's easier to say, Manzanita.
Yeah, Louisa, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to put your book on the screen here first, and we'll end with this too also. This is your book, Die Hard Atheist. It came out a couple years ago. I was just telling you I purchased it, and I've been reading it, and first of all, kudos to you. You are a very good writer. You're good with the words, and that's what writing is all about. So it's like
I'm a writing instructor, or I was. I just recently retired. Well, I still kind of am. I still have a few clients.
So, do I have the year right? Is it 82 or 87 that you had this near-death experience?
It was 82 when I was 22.
And the fascinating thing about this, and when you in your book, when you write about this, it's really amazing because first of all, you're what, 24, 25, right?
I was 22.
You're 22, and you had cardiac arrest in a nightclub of all places. So you want to briefly explain what happened here?
Yeah. So I at that time was living in New York City, specifically go to nightclubs. And I had a friend who was a former coke dealer come down. He brought cocaine, but we ran out at the club. And we were coming down. And for me, I was a very insecure young woman. We can go into all my, psychological past, but I wanted to feel good again. So we tried to buy some. When we snorted it, my date, threw down his straw and he said, "We've been had. This is not cocaine. I don't know if it's baby powder or what." And, there's nothing I like less than losing money, right?
Yeah, right.
Those were all my tips, And so I just thought, well, I'm going to snort it all anyway. Maybe it's something. There's something in there. And then years later, I've been sober 31 years now, and I am friends with many a former drug dealer. When I tell them my story, if they're old, they say in the 80s we used to cut cocaine with lidocaine, and it sounds like you got sold pure lidocaine. And lidocaine poisoning, people commit suicide with it just by squeezing a tube out and swallowing it all, if it's meant for topical use.
Yeah.
And I snorted this whole pile of what I think was pure lidocaine, and it stopped my heart.
Yeah. So unlike a lot of people who say they go to the tunnel and stuff like that, you basically shot up into space, huh?
I did. I shot up into the sky, and then I was over the ocean, and then I was diving into the ocean, and I surfaced and came to the land and saw a house and traveled to the house, and I knew my ancestors were in that house. I could feel them, and I could sense that we all crossed through this house. Like it was a way station, and I hadn't cared at all about my ancestors, and I had been an atheist, but then when I thought I want to see the view out the window, something pulled me across the floor and up and over the windowsill, and all I was feeling was this great delight. I didn't have my body by that point. When I reached the threshold of that house, I was suddenly just a point of awareness. So as a point of awareness, I sailed over the ocean, and into the sun. I'm just going to comment before I tell the rest of the NDE that means that I went through air, water, land, wood, and then I flew into the sun, which is fire. So it's sort of like I'm going through all these different aspects of I don't know what. But when I was flying over the water, that was my tunnel. It wasn't a tunnel, but it had many NDEers will describe the sense of swooshing forward, a very like delicious feeling of speed, like better than when you're skiing, than when you're riding a motorcycle, just this feeling of speed. And what I believe now is that my vibration was being raised to the point where I could meet my angel. So the sun was getting bigger and bigger. First of all, I should say that while I was flying over the ocean, I had a skeptical thought. I thought, wait a minute, people fly like this in dreams. Isn't this a little too ideal? There have been other NDEers who thought that too. There's this beautiful sunset. I'm zooming over the ocean. I'm flying. And then I thought, is this real? And a voice answered me, which really surprised me. I had not expected to be answered, and said, more real than anything back there. And I understood that back there meant that whole Louisa thing that I had been trying to do on Earth, which was really not working out well at all. I was really glad that stuff was over with, but I understood what the voice was saying telepathically was that this is more real. And I'd be happy to talk about why it is more real later. But anyway, I passed through a filament and I was inside the sun and I was in the light and being held by this being who was just filling me with love, love, love. You can't describe. I used to cry describing how much love it was. And then abruptly, apropos of nothing, said, you can't stay, you're not done yet. And that didn't mean anything to me, except that I couldn't stay. So I sort of threw a temper tantrum, which I think was actually me passing back into my physical body. I was extremely bummed when I figured out I was back in what I thought of as the meat puppet. And he wanted me to move this big, I thought of my tongue as a big loafy thing downstairs. When he wanted me to answer, it was the bartender was doing had been doing CPR on me and brought me back. And to answer him, the idea of language, of coding and making noise by passing air out of your mouth just seemed like, oh my God, all I had done was a little bit of telepathy on the other side, but I already was like completely disgusted with. It was like somebody said I had to go to kindergarten for the next 60 years, and I just into it.
So, you were talking about the fact that, that going through the water was your tunnel. I have a theory.
Over the water.
Over the water. Okay. I have this theory. You tell me. I mean, I've done a lot of reading about this. I've never had a near-death experience myself. I don't think. I was involved in a weird car accident many years ago, but it wasn't what we call near-death experience. But sometimes I wonder if these experiences that people filter them through their personal, like meat puppet experience because they're inexplicable. You can't describe them. So my theory is that everyone that goes through this is more or less describing the same experience, but they don't know how to describe it in words. It's indescribable. So therefore, is there anything to that?
It's close. The way I would change that is that on the other side, we are shown what we will understand. And so, for example, many NDEers are told, if you cross this doorway, you're never coming back to your body. If you step over that wall, you'll never go back to your body. If you cross that brook, you'll never go back to your body. Step over that painted line, one person said. And so it's just the concept of border, but the form it appears in changes with every individual. In my case, the reason I went to the sun instead of seeing, say, Jesus, is that my father, who was trained me to be a good atheist from a very young age, had told me that all energy comes from the sun, and therefore all of my thoughts, everything I am, comes from the sun that I've absorbed through eating plants and animals and photosynthesis.
Well, when you go back to the Native American or just indigenous peoples over the course of millennia, I mean, the 5 things you named are the
Mhm.
elements of the earth or the elements of
Yeah.
life. You know,
In
like
ancient Chinese, that's where I know of the wood. Yeah,
yeah.
the element.
So you basically described yourself at that time as a diehard atheist, and um, you were talking about the woo woo factor about how you didn't want to be one of those people that is one of those religious people, but it's not necessarily an either or thing, is it? I mean, I mean, I don't think you have to be a devout Christian to actually buy the concept of God in the afterlife based on the way you've described it. Do you?
Language is a tricky thing. What I meant by atheist and who I was at 22 was someone who said there is nothing beyond the physical world, there is nothing beyond atoms, and there is nothing, or photons, I guess I would acknowledge, and anything religious or ghost or anything like that, it's a bunch of tomfoolery. I had written papers in high school and in college proving there was no God. So I would like take on Descartes or take on Kierkegaard, and I'd write this whole paper. I'd show it to my dad so proudly, and he'd be like, "Good job," you know that. And so that's who I was, and that's why I would not accept my NDE as real.
Now that's really funny because I always use and I don't say this in a Christian sense at all. I always use that my proof of the fact God is real is that you and I are talking
Yeah,
because you
I
know
know.
so, I mean, no offense to your previous position, but the fact of the matter is intelligent life doesn't have to exist. Supposedly, there are the alternate universes where there's no life at all. There's just stars
Mhm.
floating around, you know? So I just look at that idea of the fact that humans are communicating or that even hear is proof of the fact
I'm
that
with you on that, Jim. And I really think that the materialist dogmatic mindset comes from a failure to take a step back and say, wait, what are we talking about here? An NDEer who died recently, I'm not thinking of her name, but she was a biophysicist. And she said when she was studying, like, what cells do, she used to, as a scientist, feel like, this, how could this possibly happen, you know, that
yeah,
cells do these things, and antibodies do all these amazing complex things that we're still discovering. And she would just like, they always ask like, what's more detail, rather than how the heck did this come to be. And the idea that it's just random trial and error. Anyway, after she had her NDE, Joyce Hawks, I believe is her name, uh, then she completely changed her
yeah,
perspective.
I don't know if you're aware of this, Louisa, but Frederick Crick, the guy who discovered DNA, he said it was way too complex for it to happen by chance, and
Yes.
I totally believe that. I mean, you look at the system, you're like, you've got to be kidding. This didn't happen through trial and error. This is
Yeah,
nuts.
yeah, yeah. How many monkeys? You know, you can have monkeys typing out Hamlet if there's
Yeah,
enough of
right.
them, but you couldn't have DNA made by accident.
Yeah. Now the other thing I want to touch on too. I talked to a lot of people, alien abduction experiencers here, and
Mm-hmm.
they, uh, the few of them who end up actually asking the aliens questions. Supposedly, this is all alleged or supposedly, but I'm going to mention this because I don't think every single one of these people are lying.
Right?
Uh,
I'm yeah.
they have said that the aliens have told them that what we're doing here in this reality isn't really reality, that the reality is on the quote unquote other side, just like you're saying. And I'm starting to wonder now. There was just an article in Popular Mechanics the other day, and I'm really I maybe it's because I'm a nerd. I go for the scientific validation of some of this stuff. There, for the first time now, scientists said that they think the fermion subatomic particle might be the gateway to an alternate dimension, you know? So, so the thing is, because everyone talks about, like you said, there's a boundary or something like that. And if there's an alternate, the theory, I'm doing way too much talking. I'm really sorry, but I'm going to finish. The theory is that some of these, if not all of these, extraterrestrial spacecraft travel interdimensionally, and so that there's another dimension beyond what we're living in. And that might also be the same dimension we go to or that we reside in when we're not here. So I don't know. Like, what was my point?
I think I forget what your point was too, but I know that I have one woman came to an NDE near-death experiencers meeting because an alien spaceship had hovered over her house, and she just didn't know where else to go. She said it was gigantic, just indescribably large and silent, and she said that she felt the love coming from it, the light coming from it. So I have a theory that angels and extraterrestrials are really one and the same.
Yeah.
I apologize for my cats.
No. It's very entertaining. I like it.
They're playing boxes, so they're making a lot of noise. But one thing before, what's that? Before we leave it, my thing just went off. I got to be sure I'm plugged in. Before we stop talking about my near-death experience, I just need to clarify that I completely denied it when I came back, because I tried to completely deny it, because who we are is really important to us. And who I was my dad's daughter, who was an atheist, and with him in this crusade to show how silly all things spiritual were. As you pointed out, I thought kind of my only choice was to be religious going forward, and I wasn't going to do that. So I just kind of shoved it away in the back of my mind and said it must have been something to do with hypoxia. It must have been that as my brain closed down, I went through these ideas and came to the point of love, kind of at the center of my consciousness. So now I get so grumpy, Jim, when I read scientists looking for NDEs in the brain and saying, oh, I think it's, a DMT release, or I think it's this or that. And as there are getting to be more and more thousands of us now, I mean, do they really think that we're all just...
Well, that's the thing, Louisa. You're absolutely right. And this is my primary thing about the whole alien phenomena. That is, there's too many goddamn people reporting it. Not every, I have a friend of mine who doesn't buy any of this stuff. And he says, well, everybody's lying. No, hundreds and thousands of people? No. And you're right.
And why would I want to become a weirdo?
That's right. That's the other thing.
I was happy just being proving God didn't exist. Yeah. And then I did I like to call it closeted. I was closeted about my NDE for 30 years.
Yeah, there's no upside to lying.
No.
So why would you lie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the rebukes I've gotten from my family and even insults that I get now. Just recently, because I had an experience with a haunting in this house, and I was telling it over at a friend's house, and one of the guests just said, I don't believe in any of that stuff. So I let it go because I didn't want to be an unpleasant guest.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say, so do you think I'm stupid or lying? Like, which are you saying?
Yeah.
I have a friend who, he's a near-death experiencer, and he's in the next book that I have that's coming out. There go the cats. But he says when he told his NDE to his best friend, who said, I think you were hallucinating, and then he tried it again with another person who said, I think you were hallucinating, because these NDEs were before it was part of popular culture. And he said it's like as if I said, I went to a dinner party last night, at Jan and Bill's, and I sat next to Christine, and we had a really nice conversation. And your friend said, do you really think that was Christine? Maybe it was a turtle. Maybe you were in the garden and you saw a turtle, and you thought you were at that party talking to Christine. And you want to say, I know a turtle from Christine. And I want to say, I know this alternate reality from dreaming, hallucinating. I never did hallucinogens in all of my drinking days. I was afraid of them. So I've never had a hallucinogenic experience. Cocaine just made me feel confident and excited. This was a completely different experience. So what I like to point out to people, and you'll see this in the book, is that what you and I are talking now, based on these kind of holographs in our minds that are being synthesized by our brains to give a model of reality so we can steer and find food and be safe. And
Louisa, you do a very good job in the first chapter of your book pointing out the whole holographic nature of reality, about the fact that we're bound by what our senses give us, and then our senses then we model stuff based on our sensory input, and you do a very good job explaining it. Kudos to you. That's one of the things that impressed me, actually.
and did you get to the part where I talk about, like, as far as survival of the fittest? The ones of us who survive would be the ones who don't have any awareness of spiritual happenings.
Right.
Because it'd be like, oh, look, there's my great aunt. And then
And you're dead. That tiger isn't real.
Yeah. Man, that's a new dimension I never thought of. Maybe we wouldn't know which was which. That's a good one. In any case, the ones of us who have survived are the ones who are thickest and who are just most like what's in front of my face.
Yeah.
That's what a human being is.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if I completed my thought there about the fact that a lot of the abductees say, well, I think I did, about the fact that, well, and you said the same thing, that maybe all this stuff is actually jumbled together, all this extraterrestrial stuff, near-death experiences, angels, that maybe it's all part of one single realm. I don't know. Go ahead.
Well, a friend of mine who was a pilot said he was, and I have so many people, when I come out about my woo-woo stuff, many people have a story that they have kept to themselves because they can't explain it. And in his case, he was flying with the co-pilot. They saw a bar of golden light coming from the sky over the Atlantic Ocean. It was in their path. And so, they weren't going to wire, talk to the ground control and say, hey, can we go around this big golden bar that's coming from the sky? So they went into it. The whole plane electronics died everywhere. Their control panel, in the cabin, everywhere. And they were panicking, and they came out of it on the other side. Everything came back up, and they were fine. And so they're flying in silence, he said, and he turned to the co-pilot and he said, what are we going to say about that? And the co-pilot's like freaking out too. They're both like just sweating like crazy. And he goes, about what? And the pilot was like, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
Share this, yeah, because it can't be explained. And friends that have dealt with ghosts, very real ghosts, appearing in their house and things like that they just stop talking about it.
So you in your book, you go about talking about the fact that at some point you realize you have for lack of a better term, and forgive me, I don't actually know if you refer to him as this, but I'm just a shorthand. You have a guardian angel named Ignacio, right? And when did you figure that out, or that was the name of this being, or?
So two different things. When did I figure out that I had an angel?
Yeah.
That happened first. So basically, I was driving home extremely drunk. I had to cross over a narrow bridge, and I was so drunk that I just saw a whole bunch of reflectors. I wanted to die at that point because I was nearing the bottom of alcoholism, and so I just thought I'd shoot for the middle. And when I got to my house, I got out of the car. I had to hold on to the door because I couldn't stand. And I thought, man, I drive like such a badass when I'm wasted. And at that moment, something shot from the sky. It felt to me like it shot from the sky through me. It felt like the person was really trying to get through to me. There was this urgency to it. And he said, this is the last time I can help you. And you do know right from wrong. And at that point in my life, I'd been reading a lot of Bukowski and drinking, and I was going to Keggers at age 34, and I was chasing after this boy who was 21, and I was writing in my journal. The whole idea of right and wrong just comes from a hive mentality. There's nothing really to it. It's so that the species will survive. And so when he said, you do know right from wrong, who was referencing that? point in my journal, which was shocking to me. And that memory is crystal clear, whereas everything else, the bridge and that are crystal clear. Otherwise, I was blacked out. So spiritual memories are somewhat different. So I knew someone had talked to me, and I understood that someone had been saving me from my folly, from my idiocy, from throwing away my life again and again as a late stage alcoholic. And it took me a month before I went to an AA meeting and got sober, and I haven't had a drink for 31 years. So he spoke to me then, and then he began speaking to me again. The most notable one, I would say, after that was when my sister was dying in the hospital, and he said, you need to tell her about the light. You need to tell her about the light. And I was like, what is this? She's going to live another 2 weeks. That's what the doctor said, and I don't know where this is coming from. And then I also began to feel the light coming in the bedroom, the hospital window, which didn't open. The window didn't open, so I didn't understand how it was seeping in kind of the bottom, and then it was kind of spiraling over my sister's body like a galaxy in my mind's eye. And then I'd open my eyes, it was like 4 a.m. and nothing. And he just wouldn't let up, man. He just wouldn't let up. And so he began to give me overtones of, she's afraid to cross. You need to tell her about the light. And I was still saying, no, no, no. And then they can play back memories for you. They will get something from your brain. Sorry, the cat's almost knocked this off.
Oh.
Oh, it's so connected. Get out of here.
Hold it. I got to ask you, though, before you go on. At this point, were you denying the fact that your near-death experience was real?
I was still trying to. So this was in 1997. It had happened in 1982. I was 2 years sober, but I was still trying to be normal. And so the two memories he played back were when my sister had said to me, I can hear perfectly even when I look like I'm out on the morphine, and that my younger sister had told me, my older sister had said, to die of cancer at 41 is the biggest diss God can give you. So he played those back for me. He said, she will hear you, and she believes God is dissing her, and you need to help her. And so finally, just because he wouldn't let up, I said, okay, I'll do it. That's the first time I spoke back to him. The first time of many now, but it doesn't mean I've always done what he said. And so I went and I knelt by her ear, and I told her what a beautiful life she had lived and how proud, everyone was of her, but that her body didn't work. And then I said, Jesus will take you, because she was Catholic. Jesus will fold you in his arm. You'll be so warm. And I just said, we love you. And then I went and sat down, and 20 minutes passed, and then she hemorrhaged and died. I ran around like a chicken with my head off, my brother too, and trying to get help. And a doctor held a stethoscope to her and said, her heart is still beating, but it'll stop when she runs out of oxygen. And to me, I was just like, why can't you save her? I understood that she had cancer all through her, but I just felt like they should revive her, save her. And so I wanted to kill the little doctor, I always think of like Homer Simpson with Bart. That's what I wanted to do to the doctor. And then all of a sudden, all that was washed away as my sister came to me as a presence so strongly. If you think of someone that you love, if you think of what it is like to be around them when they love you, there's a certain, I'm going to call it the woo-woo word, vibration. There's a certain, their love has a certain flavor to it. And I felt hers, and I felt she was saying, I'm wonderful, I'm so happy. And all my anger was instantly gone, like an overexposed photograph gets rid of shadows. And I felt so full of joy that my biggest problem was not letting it show on my face, because it was not appropriate. And her body meant nothing to me then. I was just like an empty peanut shell. She was gone. She was not there anymore. And she told me to convey a message to her son, who was 2, which I did. So I knew that that had definitely not been my idea. I was fighting so hard not to do it, and he was pushing so hard for me to do it. We were just in a battle until I finally said, okay. and then the next couple times were a lot easier because I was at a stoplight in Seattle and at a freeway exit, and the light turned green, and the same voice says, "Don't go." And so I kind of was like, I remember he said, that he wasn't going to help me anymore, but maybe he's helping me again. Like this kind of flashed through my mind very quickly. I look in the rear view. There's no one behind me, so what do I have to lose? So I just sat there at the green light, and then I kind of felt like an idiot. And so I go, "How long? Don't go." And then this car going 100 miles an hour goes through the intersection. And boy, that was an eye-opening moment for me, because then I spoke to him again. I said, "Thank you." That's the first time I had said thank you. Now, this story in particular has happened to many people.
Oh, I was going to talk to you afterwards. This happened to me too. The very same thing. Don't go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it has happened to people, and it has saved lives, and it is your angel.
Saved my life too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I don't know. I don't. It's a long story, but yeah, no, that's the thing I was going to talk about afterwards.
After we're not recording, I'd love to hear it, but that is one that many people know. Many people, know who's calling on the phone, before they answer it. I accidentally wrote down a woman's name before she told it to me, and really pissed her off. She was up in arms. She was just like, "How do you know my name? I was the director of the writing center, and she wanted a session, and it was pre-online sign up. So she was going to tell me her name, and I wrote it. And she said, "I've never been here in my life." And she was really upset. And so I said, I just must have picked it up somehow. And she was like, "I'm not buying that, lady. You've been spying on me, or somebody has." And that was also the first time I emailed somebody about it. And I told a guy who was there in the writing center when it happened. He saw the whole thing. He didn't see me write it, but he saw her reaction and heard her argument and all. And that's the first time that I was willing to say, this weird thing happened to me. And in my mind, I'm starting to connect the dots. That was, maybe around, we're getting up to maybe 6 of these weird things have happened by that point. And I'm thinking, I wonder if it has to do with that thing that happened in New York.
Well, when did you find out Ignacio's name?
It's not his name, and he would want to correct you, Jim, and say that's not my freaking name. So what happened was, during the pandemic, I talked to him a lot because I was, in isolation, and my son had gone to college, and I don't like the word angel. It has religious connotations to it. So I said, "Can't you tell me your name? Because I don't like angel." And first thing he tells me is, "There are no names on the other side. Why would you need a name if you have telepathy?" If I want to, say, I don't know, Richard Nixon, I just have to think it to you. And, so the name is not needed. And so he said, "We don't have names." And so then I said, please, just give me a name. And so then he surprised me again, because he said, "I have had so many names in so many lifetimes, and none of them are in alphabets that you know." And I kind of went, "Oh." Because I was thinking Gabriel, like Michael, something like that. And he's like, "There, and I said, "Well, what's the last one? What's the last, and so I said, "I'm going to go downstairs and meditate." And so he's very indulgent with me. It's like I'm a little toddler, and I've kind of got like the
well, I hate to say it,
all over my face or something.
Relatively speaking, you are. We all are. So
we all are, right? But so he indulges me, and he calls me little one. That's how I feel when he addresses me, not by my name, but little one. And so I sat down, and he showed me an I, a capital I, and a G next to it. And I said, "I don't know any name with Ig except for Iggy Pop." And he goes, "Shh." And he goes, "What's Iggy Pop's name?" Like, he knows Iggy Pop. Like, he knows everything, right? And so.
Is Iggy Pop's name Ignacio?
Ignacio, that's the full name.
I didn't know that.
It's an I. And so he very expressly drew a capital E below the I. And he wanted me to know it was Ignacio, which I Googled after that, and it means born of fire, and it's Etruscan. So the Ignacio is more the Italian kind of
Yeah, it's an
Spanish
Italian name, right?
ignite, right? And
Right.
Ignacio was just in Etruscan times, I don't know, they had a different pronunciation for it or a different whatever. And so I call him Ignacio, and he's fine with that. But for the most part, it's just not necessary,
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I have a regular guest on the show named Bruce Solheim, and Bruce written like 11 books. He's a professor of history at Citrus College in Glendora, California, and he has been communicating pretty much his entire life since he was a kid. He was abducted by aliens when he was a child, and he's been communicating with one of his abductors named Anzar, and it's very similar to the plan of communication you're talking to. I get back to that thing about maybe this is all one thing. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it is all one thing. And Ignacio's saying that he's had many lives. Are you still there?
Yep, I'm still here.
Why am I not? I don't see you now. Huh. Okay, there it's back. I worry about my power. Or it's just going to sleep. Anyway, what was I saying?
We were talking about the fact that it's all one same thing.
Yeah, and then I started to say something, and I can't think of what it was.
Oh yeah, I know, it's terrible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's being 65. Oh yeah, Ignacio said he'd had so many lifetimes, and I really do think that life is a kind of a school where we learn to overcome barriers to love and love. And when that connection happens, when you experience the barrier, like, oh, that person has a different skin color than me, and then you say, oh wait, we are the same. Boom. Then you've had the love connection, and it grows God somehow. It's about creating more love and learning to do that. And when you become more and more loving, I think you graduate.
That seems to be the point. Everybody who comes back from the other side and says that the whole thing is a giant school.
Yeah.
It's like we're here to learn stuff, and the real thing that amazes me about that is that means that emotionality is real. Not just love, but because the thing is, what are we? We're stuck on a planet with limited resources, so we fight over the resources. I mean, that's part. And then we have our personal desires, and all that sort of stuff, and sex and all that crap, which on the other side you assume doesn't really exist, because if you don't have a body, you don't have any sex. So, but the thing is, we're all fighting over this stuff. I think the point is how we handle it. Is that
Yes, I mean, love is way more than oxytocin and dopamine. Love is an energy, and I think it is what Enerva, it says, I think it is what the life force is, love. And that's why I felt so much when I was returning to my source, was that's home, as a lot of NDEers say, that's home. And I didn't see like grass or beautiful mountains or anything like that, but so many NDEers that do, they say every blade of grass is filled with as much like individuality in life as a human, right? And so we're just all kind of, I like to say, nerve endings of God, and it does come down to that we're all the same thing. And when I ask Ignacio these big questions, he scolds me a lot. I can tell you the many times he scolded me. But he says, little one, you are getting to be a human right now. Be a human. And like when I'm so upset and crying about something, then, I'll say like, why do I have to suffer? And he says, I kind of miss it because I can't feel that anymore, And so these soupy, thick emotions and the whole thing of like overcoming and, being courageous and all the things that we do here on earth, they don't have that anymore. And so he was kind of saying, like, as if I were in the middle of a roller coaster ride, and I was saying, the ground's not stable here. He was kind of, duh.
Louisa, here's a quote out of your book, which I found just very fascinating. We are wired as physical beings to be selfish in thought, but that's not what matters. It's the choices we make and our behaviors, the way we act toward others, that matter. I thought that's brilliant, because I mean, at least you're you're not negating the fact that, yeah, as humans, we basically have to be selfish sometimes. There's just
Mhm.
no way around it, you know.
Mhm.
But that, on the other hand, that's not the point either. You know, it's like how
Mhm.
you handle it. I'm sorry. I just think there's a lot of brilliant stuff in here. I think you did a fantastic.
Well, thanks. I remember my dad listening to the radio, hearing something on the radio and going, quiet, quiet, this guy makes sense. And then it turns out it was somebody interviewing him about law. So I'm kind of like, yeah, that person put it really well. But basically, your first thought is the thought to keep you in your body. And that's the selfish thought. Like, I need that banana, right?
Yeah, hold it. But you did bring up in your book, and every other person I've ever talked to about this says the same
Mhm.
thing. At some point, somebody says you have to go back, and most people refuse. They don't want to go back.
Mhm. Mhm. I didn't
So,
have any choice. I
oh yeah,
didn't have any
you didn't have
choice.
a choice. But it's been brought up. There's a very famous story. Gary Shandling, the famous comedian who passed away a few years ago. He said before he died, he said he had a car accident in his 20s where he had a near-death experience, and he said the angel asked him point blank, "Do you want to continue living as Gary Shandling?" And he said yes, and he went back. So
Mhm.
like you pointed out, a lot of people appear to be given the choice, but
Mhm.
most people don't want to go back because it's so
Mhm.
wonderful.
Yes, it is. It's home. It's home, and it's where you feel whole and completely happy and peaceful. And I didn't go all the way back, and I didn't even go as far as a lot of NDEers get to talk to God. Some of them get to shoot around space. But I understand that I am in the middle of the ride, and it's a really cool ride, and it has gotten better and better as I've gotten older in terms of the amount of joy that I have, to the point where now where I'm just like ridiculously happy. But I wanted to say something, and again, being 65, I have forgotten it. Oh, I know what it was. It was that I think that, for most of human development, we have had spirituality, whether it was nature based or pagan, and then eventually religious. I think the religious spirituality is very fucked up. I think that the religious stuff got mixed with ego. If you have a jealous God, an angry God, a punishing God, you've gotten pretty far away from God, right? Or you've got to narrow. You can only get in if you do this, that, and do the dance just right. You'll get into heaven. Like if we're God's creations, and God should love us as it is. However, that was probably devised to keep the rich rich and the poor poor, the peasants.
Yeah.
There's one line that says slaves obey your masters, women obey your husbands. It's trying to maintain the status quo.
Right.
Sorry,
Right.
that was the dog. But I feel we have
An animal sounds in the background.
I got two dogs, two cats.
Yeah.
But we've gotten to the point now where we have very little spirituality, because almost very few people take religion literally. And I feel that what's happening now with the triumph of greed and the ultra rich and the material, that's kind of the end product of capitalism without love, right?
Yeah. Yes. And also,
so we have to outgrow it. And the reason I do these interviews is not because I have fun or because not to say I don't have fun with you, Jim, but it's because I want the world to wake up. And even in the years so I came out as a woo-woo when I went to IONS in 2012 and told my story, right? So I've really only been talking about this stuff for 13 years, but I am determined for the rest of my life to keep talking about it, because it's the single most valuable thing I can do for humanity, is put more grains of sand on the side of the scale that says the afterlife is real, what you do matters. It's not just the one who has the most dollars wins. No.
Right. And getting back to your thoughts on traditional religion too, although I agree with everything you said, I also think, get back to the fact that I think all religion is some sort of attempt to codify in some primitive, stupid human terms exactly what you're talking about. And it all falls short. That's the way I look at it. It falls short, but it's either sincere or in some cases a clandestine attempt to explain that, what's your point of view. I don't know.
Yeah, and people have been coming back from near-death experiences for thousands of years. There are records of them from thousands of years ago. And I think that some of religion grew from that, and the idea of heaven grew from that. And the people I know who've gone to hell, they experience dropping. And when I was told you have to go back, you can't stay, you're not done yet, I experienced dropping, which was the antithesis. I was dropping in utter darkness, which is the antithesis of what I felt when I was zooming through the ocean to approach the sun. So getting back into my body, I had to lower my vibration. And I often say, sorry, people do go to hell, but they send themselves with their anger and by closing themselves off from God. And I'm sorry, I can't really.
It's all right. No problem. Very charming. I love the pet, so.
She's a sweet animal too. But anyway, the one friend, Kathy McDaniel, who went to hell, she had a big resentment against God, against life, because her baby had died and she had just never forgiven God. But she also really believed in hell because she'd been raised Catholic, and so she always thought, I'm not the good girl I seem to be, so I'm going to go to hell. And so it became kind of self-fulfilling, but at the end of her experience, she made it to the light. She made it to heaven. And another one I know, he died from swallowing a whole bunch of cocaine, and he went down also, but then he felt his ancestors calling him, and he chose life, and he chose the opposite of what he had, which was a constant life of drug use. And he came back and he never used coke. He never used it. I mean, he's been clean and sober ever since. When he was 40 something when that happened, and he had been utterly unable to quit. So I do, what we do matters. What we do matters. You do know right from wrong. I mean, that's huge. There is a right, there is a wrong. And he still says it a lot when I, don't want to do something, then he will point out you do know right from wrong. The one story I like best is that my young girl I knew who was in the program of AA, who was just such a loudmouth and just such an attention hog and just such a, oh my God, a handful. She called me one time. I was in a doctor's office in a waiting room, and I said, oh my God, I think she's going to ask me to be her sponsor. No way am I letting that hot mess into my life. And then here comes Ignacio. I didn't call him that yet. And he said, she's no crazier than you were. And all she needs is love.
Yeah.
Why can't you love her? And I was like, because she'll just make a huge mess in my life. And he's like, not having it, not. So then when she finally came around to it, so I was wondering, will you? And I was like, yes, I'll be your sponsor. And I was just like, dang it, Ignacio. And then she turned out to be this wonderful, wonderful person. And she studied to be a journeyman, and she would call me in the weirdest times, but she'd be like, I was in my welding class and I sat down and they poured coffee all over my chair and they were saying, oh, look, Vanessa's all wet now. And like, she would have things, and I'd be like, you need to be higher than they are. You need to be better than they are. Go back in there and just do your work. And so she was killed in an accident with, there was somebody operating a crane without a spotter, and there's a big metal hook on the bottom of the crane. And I wrote about it in the book because I had known something was going to happen to her, and Ignacio had made it so that I saw her one last time and got to tell her I love her. Before that
and
happened.
was he right that basically she only needed love?
Yes. And it's just there's so many beautiful moments because she was the one who gave out the coins at the end of the month, and she'd always be like, yeah, rock star, I'm gonna give out the coins. And like she was just like, oh, I gotta break a guitar or something while she was doing that. And I remember the day that she was standing with the coin thing, and I just said to her, so Vanessa, it's coin day. And she goes, yeah, I know. And I'm like, and who is the coins really about? And she goes, the other people. And I'm like, So she went out and she said, I'm very proud to help people and hand out these coins today. And everybody in the whole meeting, there was a big meeting. They were like, what the hell happened to Vanessa?
Hey,
But
Louisa, I gotta ask you about this. I
uh-huh.
had my cousin's husband passed away a few years ago, and he was a hardcore alcoholic. He had been sober for 40 years, and I was still surprised. A couple years before he died, I was talking to him in California, and he told me, and he's in his 70s at this point, and he
Mhm.
told me, he said, "Jim, I hate to admit this, but I still, when I wake up in the morning, every single day, still to this day, the first thing I think about is having a drink." And
Really?
I can't imagine an addiction that strong. I really can't. And well, he didn't. And he was a pillar of the community. They've named a baseball field after him in California. But he said, yeah, he said, it's still, he said he was still going to AA like 40 years later, you know?
I go to AA too, and I love it. It's my church, and they're my people, and we laugh and have the
All
greatest
right, now
time.
hold on, I have to ask you about this too. So I
Uh-huh.
am not an alcoholic, but I
Uh-huh.
was asked by a friend several years ago to accompany her to AA meetings. Now,
Uh-huh.
that technically doesn't make me a sponsor, but it's basically what I was acting as. And I came to the conclusion, you just said it's kind of your religion.
Uh-huh.
It is kind of, there's some religious concepts involved in that whole, for lack of a better term,
It
presentation.
boils, right, it boils down a beautiful way of living, which is basically look inward, find your source of God, then think about all the things that you carry with you, all the baggage, and all the things you do to shoot yourself in the foot. That's what the fourth step is about. And then learn to quit doing that shit, and then go back in the past and own the messes you've made and do what you can to clean it up. I remember going back to Edmonds Community College with all these reams of paper and pens and things, and the secretaries were so embarrassed, but I said, I stole all this when I was teaching here,
Uh-huh.
and I just wanted to give it back and get it clear. My son used to think I was insane because I would get out of the store, and this one time I found this little stevia thing that they hadn't rung up, and I'm like, I got to go back in and pay for this. It's weird. It's a way of life, and I have no desire for a drink. If I take, like, somebody sprayed a tincture in my mouth one time on because I'd hit my head, and she said, oh, here, and she just sprayed that in my mouth, and it's like I went on a magical mystery tour of memory, like just with it swirling around in my head, and it seems to say, Louisa, we still love you, like all of these things, and then I was like, that has alcohol, keep that away from me. But I don't crave a drink as long as I don't have a drink. And I love my life, and I love people who live by the 12 steps and are not full of shit. And, when Brené Brown described open-hearted people and sort of the traits of open-hearted people, it sounded to me like the people in AA who are truly sober and work in a good program. It's about being kind. It's about, like, not needing to be right, not needing to make anybody else wrong, not needing to win. Just trying to be, like, this was an anathema to me when I first came in because my parents had told me beat everyone. That was the rules they gave me, and
Yeah.
it's to be a worker among workers, to be a friend among friends, to just not be, not to, like somebody was sharing this morning, and he goes, I was thinking about me, and like, that's, we say I may not be much, but I'm all I think about.
I got to pull another quote out of your book here too. This really fascinated me also. You said, haunting, it seems to me, is a form of addiction. As a ghost, I want so much to change something that happened, whether it's my own death, another death, or something else I can't accept, that my spiritual development halts. Which I thought, well, that's really interesting because that's, people wonder what ghosts are all about. I mean, it's like there's the thing about, the traditional thing about kind of stuck in purgatory, but there
Yeah,
does
yeah.
seem to be something to that, and you're kind of referencing that too, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah. So the woman who was haunting this house, she had a really traumatic experience here that she couldn't let go of, and the haunting occurred, and I comforted her. I kind of witnessed, like, I know this must have happened to you, and I'm so sorry that happened to you, but you can leave it now.
Yeah,
Whereas, like, for me, it's like if I say, why didn't my mom love me? Unconditionally, why was her love so stingy? I can haunt that. and just be like, well, I'm just defective because my mom was, damaged, and so I'm damaged. And at a certain point, you just have to let go of it and say, it was meant to happen. It is what it is, and move on. One of my friends is dying now of cancer that, she's in her early 50s, and it was an umbilical cancer, so it's all through her body. And she made a special trip here to see me. I asked Ignacio, can you cure her? I was just sitting and meditating, can you cure her? And he came back to me, he said, little one, this is her path. You know nothing about it. And basically, she is one of the kindest, sweetest, most helpful, most love-glowing people I know. And I feel like I told her, you might be ready to graduate. And so she loved being here. We just talked about nothing but the other side. And she said, after a while, this made me so happy. She said, actually, I'm kind of excited to cross.
Have you ever heard of a guy named Michael Newton, Louisa? Are you familiar with him?
I'm not going to recall it right now with my 65-year-old brain, no.
Yeah, he wrote a series of books. He was a psychologist. He interviewed hundreds of people under hypnosis, and his real fascination or his obsession was what happens in going to the assumption of reincarnation is real. And there's a guy named Ian Stevenson who I'd say basically proves it. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but Newton was interviewing people. What happens in what they called the intermission in between lives, and he said basically just was the same thing you were talking about you come back to Earth with a set path, but on the other hand, there's stuff that happens that by sheer chance that through with that is beyond the control of the gods. And I just found that, and I'm thinking, well, that's pretty much what life is, isn't it? It's basically it's a you got a pre-described path, and then shit happens.
Yeah. And the guy that I told you about, who said, I know the difference between a turtle and my friend. When he was on the other side, God said, you could choose death, and he's like, why would I choose death? And God showed him like a huge sort of Plinko board. And that this is how his life went, that there was choices all along, and you take all these choices and eventually they lead you to where you are. But you could have decided at an earlier age that, you wanted to be an astronaut, or you wanted to, I don't know, something completely different, and it would have taken you down a different Plinko path. And so the choices that we make do count. But I also think, I don't know, I mean, I don't know what you think about past life regression.
Well, that's what I'm talking about here, basically,
Yeah, when I did past life regression and met previous selves, some of the memories that I didn't understand why in this life they were so important to me, and I saw the connection to previous lives. And even moving to New York City, my previous incarnation, I had been a businessman in New York City, and the skyline that I loved to look at was right near where I ended up working in New York City. And I was the opposite of what I am now in so many ways. I was just all about the business, making money in business, and I made this excellent deal. And Jack Warner didn't understand the value of his Looney Tunes cartoons. He felt like, okay, they've all been shown as shorts in the theater, they're worthless now. And I bought them for $2 million, and then they were syndicated, and my company made tons of money. But then I drank too much and died. So anyway.
I'm going to put your book on the screen here again.
Okay.
Here it is, Die Hard Atheist. What is the subtitle? Excuse me, hold on.
From NDE denier to full-on woo-woo against my will.
Yeah.
And I have another book that's coming out in, I believe, August, and it's going to be published by the International Association of Near-Death Studies. And it's, I've interviewed like 50 people, and I took the top 33 and made a collection. So instead of, when people tell their NDEs, they kind of ramble, and I would record them, and then I'd use my writing skills to kind of condense them down to 2,000 words so it would fit on the page for the newsletter, and email it back to them, say, how do you feel about this draft? I'd keep their voice, if there's a way you can keep their voice, but just make the language much more
Right,
efficient.
right,
So these are
right.
2,000 word, 33 near-death experiences, all different kinds, all different forms of why they died, where they went, and it's just so cool to read it and see the differences and the similarities both.
Will you
So
come
that'll
back
be my list.
before that book comes out? I hope you'll come back so you can talk about it. I'd love
Oh,
to have
I'd
you
like
back.
to.
I've
I'd
enjoyed
like
this immensely. Thank you, Louisa. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you